Today I'd like to take a look at the story of Jacob and Laban as it continues in chapter 31 of the book of Genesis. Um, Laban's sons are a little bit upset about Jacob. They're hearing all this about Jacob back and forth. So naturally, like sons, they kind of want their share. They think maybe, Jacob's getting too much for himself. So what happens, and it happens a lot in these situations, is they go to Laban naturally and they complain. They say Jacob is stealing from Laban, which of course immediately gets Laban's attention. Jacob is stealing. What am I going to do about this? Uh, Laban's attitude now seems to be kind of changing towards Jacob. At first he was warm, welcoming. Jacob's a good worker. He marries the older daughter. He marries the younger daughter. Hey, things are pretty good. But then, Jacob is accumulating more wealth. He's getting more flocks. He's got his two daughters. Laban is kind of getting a little suspicious about Jacob and, exactly what he's going to do. So Jacob prays about this. Very interesting, his relationship with God, right? He's always, in these key moments, always turning to God in prayer. So as he prays to God, God says, Jacob, I think it's time for you to head home. Jacob explains to Rachel and to Laban, to Rachel and Leah, that, Laban, your dad, he's kind of been cheating me a little bit in terms of the flocks, in terms of what he wants, in terms of the wells. I'm kind of getting not a good deal here. And Rachel and Leah, very interestingly, they don't side with their dad and say, hey, we got to protect dad at all costs. Dad is really good. They say, Jacob, you're right. You are getting the short end of this. So they reaffirm what Jacob says. Jacob decides, what I have to do now. I got to take off. I can't really tell Laban I'm going to leave. Certainly can't tell his sons. I think the best thing is, a quick exit. And Leah, Rachel, they agree. They say, hey, this is probably a wise move. Rachel, though, does something that she really shouldn't have done here. And that is, she takes her father's household idols. And these were figures that were used for divinization. In terms of if you had these, you could kind of get a little insight into what the gods were thinking and kind of, help a little bit in terms of the future. Give you a little bit of a heads up. That was the thought. Kind of superstitious, but Rachel apparently bought into it, and she said, I'm going to leave, but got to take these with me. Kind of like a security blanket for her or something to help her in the future. And of course, should not have done that. Those were her father's and, really stealing. Not a good deal there. So Jacob leaves, doesn't tell Laban he's leaving. And it took 3 days for that news to get to Laban, that Jacob had fled. So he's not aware of it initially. It takes a couple of days. And so he pursues him. And he pursues him for 7 days. And he finally catches up with him in the hill country of Gilead. And there he is. And God also appears to Laban. So that night, God says, Laban, don't harm Jacob. Are you mad at him? He's taken off. But not a good thing to harm him. Laban, the next day, confronts Jacob. And he asks him, hey, why didn't you tell me that you were leaving? You didn't let me say goodbye to my grandchildren, to my daughters. This is not right. This is not fair. And then Laban accuses Jacob of stealing his gods. The statues there. And Jacob has no idea He doesn't know Rachel has taken them, so he has no idea about this. So no, I didn't do that. He says that Laban can actually kill anyone if he finds that they have the God. So if you find that they have the God, you can kill them because I know nothing about it. And truly, he did not know anything about it. Jacob doesn't have a clue that Rachel has these gods, but of course Rachel is overhearing all this now, and she's getting, what am I going to do? If my father finds them, will he kill me? I mean, all these thoughts, right? So Laban goes and she searches the tents, first of all, of Jacob, then Leah, then the two maidservants. Doesn't find the idols. Doesn't find them there. So then he goes into Rachel's tent, and he doesn't find the idols because Rachel, very smart now, she hides them in a camel cushion, and she was sitting on the cushion. So there she is, sitting on the cushion, and she says, "Oh, Dad, I really can't get up. I'm having my period now. I have to say, okay, So he searches everywhere, but doesn't search the cushion, of course, because Rachel is sitting on it, claims she's having a period, so, doesn't really bother to do that. Jacob now gets mad at Laban. He says, "Laban, you didn't find anything from all that searching. Nobody in my party took it. I didn't take it. Nobody in my party took it." And he says, "I've worked for you for 20 years. I worked 7 for the first wife, 7 for the others. I worked additional years. And you gave me no special treatment. And you frequently changed my wages, and you're going to give me this and give me that, and went back and forth, and that wasn't right." And Jacob feels in all this, though, that God is guiding. He has a strong sense here that he's not here on his own dealing with Laban, but that truly God is with him. Laban says that everything really is his, but, I'm going to make a covenant with you. It's really all this stuff belongs to me. It's my daughters, my flocks, but, let's settle this. Let's not continue this bad blood. Let's come to some sort of conclusion here. So Jacob takes a stone and sets it up as a memorial. And his kinsmen gather stones together to make a mound. They share a meal together. Interesting, right? In terms of the covenant. Memorial, stones, the meal. To share the covenant. So Laban has a name for this place. As frequently we see these places are named because they have a special meaning. And he calls this place Jagar Shedahutha, mound of witnesses. So this mound, we're all going to witness an agreement here. This is the Jagar Shahadutha, the mound of witnesses. Jacob called it Gilead, which also means the mound of witnesses. So similar expression. Laban calls upon God in this special ceremony to watch over his daughters, watch over his grandchildren. He loves his grandchildren. I'm going to be separated from them. God, I'm putting them under your protection. Again, showing his love, his reverence for God. And Laban says, I'm going to stay on my side of this memorial stone. And Jacob, you stay on your side. So the memorial stone here, it becomes kind of a dividing line. You'll go your way, I'll go my way. I won't interfere with you. You don't interfere with me. You don't take any of my flocks. I won't take your flocks. You don't take my wells. I won't take your wells. This is what we'll do. And this will be fair. I'll be on my side. You'll be on your side. No problem. Jacob offers a sacrifice to seal the agreement. And then he shares a meal with his kinsmen. So we see sacrifice and meal. Very interesting, right? And they pass the night on the mountain. So they're here on the mountain, both of them pass the night on the mountain. Well, what can we learn from the story in chapter 31? Some interesting stuff here, right? The relationship between Jacob and Laban sours. And you can see, it took a long time, 20 years for it to sour. I mean, I think a lot of us would have been souring after that first deal when he works 7 years and he gets the wrong wife. I mean, that's a big sour right there, right? I want Rachel, you can be Leah. But he hangs in a little bit longer, and Laban isn't really all that honest with him, all that fair with him, so you can see why he would sour. But the interesting thing about it is even his own daughters turn against him. I mean, you would think the daughters might have stood up for him a little bit, or said, "Oh, hey, we should leave. Dad isn't treating you correctly." I mean, so you get a little background on Laban there. I mean, if your daughters are souring against you, there's got to be an issue there. And Jacob shows his trust in God. Fundamentally, what this story shows us is that in this difficult moment in his life, when he was facing hassles from Laban's sons, who am I going to turn to? I'm going to turn to God. And I'm going to ask God to bless me. I'm going to ask God to lead me. I'm going to ask God to show me the way. We also see the negatives that happen with stealing. I mean, here we see the stealing of Rachel almost leads to a tremendous disaster. What if Laban had found those idols? What if he said, "Oh, get up from the cushion, no matter what"? And the idols are there, and the whole thing would have been gone south quickly. I mean, he could have killed Rachel, probably wouldn't have killed her, but could have done some really nasty stuff, and so it would have been a disaster. So stealing, obviously not a good thing. Thou shalt not steal, one of the commandments. We can see why. We can see here what stealing can potentially lead to, and the big thing it leads to naturally is a loss of trust. Jacob, we see the opposite. He's putting his trust in God. Rachel puts her trust in these idols. Not a good thing, Rachel. Laban basically was being unfair to Jacob, and we see the fruits of unfairness. If he had been fair to Jacob all along, Jacob sits down with him, says, "I better leave, let's work it out," things would have been a lot better. But when you're unfair, when you're unjust, it leads to negative consequences. Again, we can see the great passion in the scriptures for justice, for fairness. And of course, today, our great passion to make sure that there is justice in our land and that those injustices are corrected, because we see what unfairness and a lack of justice can lead to. We also see the importance of the covenant agreement and the importance of the sacrifice and the meal, which we're going to see embedded in the Eucharist. The Eucharist is both a sacrifice, Jesus giving his life for us in love, and it is a meal. It's a sharing of a meal because a meal expresses unity, love, concern, and support for one another. We also see the relationship at the very end of chapter 31 of the relationship between a covenant and a mountain. They spend the night on the mountain together. We're going to see God's covenant at Mount Sinai. We're going to see the new covenant on Mount Calvary. That relationship between covenant and meal, so important. Covenant and mountain, so important. Beautiful story in chapter 31. It teaches us a lot. We're going to find out a little bit more about Jacob in chapter 32. But of course, we remember the first one who said yes to following God, our wonderful father, Father Abraham. And Father Abraham had many friends. Many friends had Father Abraham. I am one of them, and so were you. So let's all praise the Lord. God bless and keep on praising the Lord.